I'm going to open the closing plenary today, and I want to start off by saying that it's been a real pleasure to spend the last 3 days with you. And I will use some of my experiences in these last 3 days just to set some of the themes that for me are going to stay for quite a while. So on top of thanking the committee for their efforts, I just want to extend my thanks to all of the speakers, all of the participants, and as well the UKFIET trustees and the executive for spending their time, their energy, and their care as well in making sure not only that everyone is making the most of this time, but also that everyone is well while we're here together. I think there's been a really productive buzz in the conversation, not only in sharing ideas, in challenging our assumptions, but also in listening to different perspectives, even when that space is a little bit uncomfortable. This closing session, I really wanted to make it a little bit reflective. I want to use it as a chance to think about what we have experienced here, but also about what that means for us as we leave and return to our lives. Conferences like UKFIET don't really have to end when we leave exam schools. The real legacy lies in what happens once we go home and once we carry forward the conversations and the questions that have started to take shape here. So as we begin this reflection, I invite you to think not only about what has inspired you or challenged you, but also how will you take these messages forward into your practice. And on that note, just to point out, we will be sending a brief survey shortly, so it would be great to hear a bit more about your experience here so that we can feed back to future committees. As I reflect on the discussions that we've had, a few themes really stand out, threads that connect the various sections that I've participated to or heard from other people. And I believe these themes will stay with me and hopefully with many of you for a long time. The first one is partnership. We often approach partnership by asking, what is it that we need to achieve and who do we need to partner with in order to get there? But I wonder what would happen if we started with the relationships instead, rather than with the objectives that we want to achieve as individual entities, building them on trust, humility, and the values that animate us. We would possibly then allow objectives to grow from them. This shift feels really urgent, necessary even, as we discuss issues connected to epistemic justice, the recognition that really knowledge is created in many different ways, rather than being already pre-packaged and in need of being passed on. And this message, I think, is particularly important as we think about working with populations that are often marginalized, that do not necessarily have a voice in a sphere like this. I'm thinking about children that I work with, but many of the conversations that I've heard in this conference talk about what it means to work with populations that are often at the margins, that are not really taken into account. So if we center relationships, we really create the possibility for a more inclusive society where diverse ways of knowing and doing are not just acknowledged, but properly valued. Another theme that has really resurfaced is that the relationship between environments and learning is key. It is impossible to think of education in its isolation from the context in which it happens. The conversation of climate justice have made that particularly clear, but also the reflections on conflict and instability. Both remind us that education systems, learners, communities, families, they're all deeply embedded and shaped by the environments in which they exist. And that in turn demand partnerships that are not only cross-sectoral, but also humble. Partnerships that recognize how difficult yet necessary it is to work across boundaries. And I think the call for interdisciplinarity in development, in international education, has made this call particularly strong. And finally, I've been struck by the sense of hope that has run through our conversations. Education is always, by its very nature, future-oriented. It asks us to imagine what could be and to prepare all involved, young people, families, communities, policymakers, for that future. And in a world where crises often dominate the headlines, holding on to this sense of hope, to this optimism despite everything else, is not naive, I don't think, it's courageous. And here I want to link back to something Professor Said introduced in his opening plenary on Tuesday. Working in education requires us all to have courage. courage to recognize, engage, and work with emotions in our approaches to learning. Education is really not always about consensus. More often than not, it involves confronting difference, inequity, and sometimes painful truths. Sitting in those uncomfortable spaces, but sitting there together, takes courage. But it is important, I think, to recognize that it is in those moments and in those spaces that learning and change can really take place. As we move into our plenary discussion, we have an important opportunity to bring together perspectives that do not always sit together easily. And this panel draws from a number of differences. We have various actors coming from governments, from academia, from the non-governmental organization, from the private sector. Each of these groups approaches education with different responsibilities, priorities, and sometimes different languages. So it is no secret that there are tensions there. And yet, precisely in those tensions and in those differences lie the possibilities of collaboration, of partnership. And when these stakeholders and ourselves listen to one another in order to identify not only how we diverge, but also how we converge, this is where we can really generate solutions that we would not have been able to generate had we not been listening to each other. That is the essence, I think, of what we have been discussing throughout the conference. The courage to step into those places, the humility to form genuine partnership, and importantly, the creativity to imagine ways forward. As we listen to the panel, I want to go back again to something else Professor Said alerted us to when we started these 3 days. He said, we want to avoid seeking solutions by using the very frameworks that have caused disadvantage in the first place. This reminder is particularly relevant. If we are serious about partnerships, then we need to revisit what we already have, and we need to resist that temptation to simply repackage and resell models that we have already used in the past. This conversation really is an invitation to think differently, to draw on diverse perspective, to value different ways of thinking, and to have that willingness to build new frameworks which we might not yet have, so that we are at least enabling ourselves to not make the same mistakes we've made in the past. Without further ado, let me introduce our panelists for today. Our first panelist is Laura Savage, Executive Director of the International Education Funders Group, the world's largest network of philanthropic foundations supporting education. With a background spanning government, aid agencies, and research, Laura brings a philanthropic and evidence-driven perspective into how global funding can help achieve SDG 4. Joining us from Nigeria, we have Folake Olatunji-David, Director of Basic Education at the Nigeria's Federal Ministry of Education. With more than 30 years of service to public education, she brings a policy implementation perspective, working directly with schools and states to strengthen inclusive and foundational learning. From Tanzania, we are very delighted to have Hussien Mohammed Omar, who is Deputy Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology. With 2 decades of leadership in government and planning, he brings a national government perspective focused on how countries design and deliver educational reform in practice. Our last panelist is Judith Herbertson, Head of Girls' Education at the UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. Having worked for government overseas, Judith offers the donor's perspective, particularly in relation to the UK's role in advancing global commitment to girls' education. And finally, helping us to guide today's discussion is our chair, Khadijah Fancy, Technical Director at Cambridge Education. With over 25 years' experience in education and social development, Khadijah has worked extensively on inclusion and safeguarding. She will be drawing on that expertise to facilitate and connect the conversation among our panelists. Before leaving the floor to Khadijah and our panelists, I also would like to invite, not you. Right, change of plan. So, can you please help me making our guests feel welcome?
on, mute off. Oh, hello. I'm going to go through the panel, and so I'm not going to take a lot of time, but everybody is going to speak as they feel comfortable. So if they want to come up to the podium, they will do so, or they will speak from their seats, or they will stand. If you can't hear, please let me know, and the panelists will try and stand up or make sure that the microphones are working. So I'm going to start by asking a question, the same question, to all four panelists. It has been a difficult time for all of us. We've discussed that throughout the conference in various different sessions. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to take stock of the conference so far, and indeed of this moment in your country, in your organizations, or in the world, no small task, and reflect on the future and how we might get to a better place for education for all children. I'm going to start with Laura.
Hello. Excellent, it works. Hi, everyone. Very close. As Fran said, I've spent 20 years, which makes me feel really old because I've been to a lot of UKFIETs at this stage. And I realize I'm now one of the elders in the room and should have a lot more wisdom than I'm about to impart. But most of my career has been spent working with funders and as a researcher working on the politics of aid. So I'm not going to talk about philanthropy and the 100 foundations that I currently work with, but across 20 years of seeing funders and the architecture as part of the problem, as well as having a huge amount of intention and passion and contribution to the issues and to the education and the rightedness of the inequalities and injustice that we see around the world. So I do think, and I have heard in several of the sessions here, that there is more grief and anger and angst than hope right now. I feel that there is an existential crisis for every single one of us who's basically been told that our entire belief system is wrong and called out that the entirety of our careers that we've dedicated is wrong. And there's a realization that there's a whole lot of the world is believing a whole set of values that we don't agree with, right? And I think we do have to take the moment and appreciate that and appreciate each other and the fact that we can come together in spaces like this, but also appreciate, take that moment and kind of appreciate that is where we are. But this is a panel about optimism and positivity, right? And I think I've got basically 2 points that in the remaining few minutes that I want to get across. One is education specific, and so the message is that education works. The message is that education has seen progress. Think back to the start of your careers, and we within the education community tend to look back and say, well, access wasn't enough. We need learning. Access was a huge accomplishment. This was one of the greatest revolutions of the last century. And here we are now, grappling with an even more complex issue in foundational learning itself and looking ahead to a whole range of yet more complex problems. Within this room, we're grappling with the deepest difficulties of education, and it's great that we can have the back and forth of the FLN and the CEL and the early childhood versus the TVET and so forth. But we've got to externally make that case together for education, because it's not one. We know that. Education is not in the reflexes of those making decisions about education. And I think everyone here can think of 10 examples right now of education work that is making a difference. And so how do we get those examples into the reflexes, into the pockets of those who are making decisions and celebrate the progress that we're making as a sector? And I think that's something that in the margins here, in the angst, I think there's a real sense of, you can hear that, and I think we should elevate that even more. The second briefer point is about the question of where we go with aid and development and these terms that we're not sure that we should be using anymore. And what does that become in a sense of looking back to say, well, over 20 years, have we made the case for something that was on the margins and is actually a set of global issues that matter to not only us working in the development industry, but everyone? And I think one of the ways out that I see is that we are all individually conscious and individually aware of the power and agency that we have to do things differently. And I am in a lot of rooms at the moment with a lot of people saying, well, how do we reshape the future? I think there's a really big question about who we are and how a room of 10 or 20 people who are often funders don't necessarily have, I mean, they have the power at the moment, but there's a lot of times when I think that we is not a we that I want to hear. But what I don't hear enough is the sense of I and me, and I have agency and I have power. Because I think in this moment it's very easy to feel powerlessness, and not only in our jobs, but in our lives, right? Like, how do we make a difference in the face of all these things that we've assumed right that are crumbling around us? But we can, so I spend a lot of my time looking at my own behaviors today, not only in the past, and thinking how much of that is the learned behavior and a learned mindset in the aid and the development industry that I've grown up in, and how much of this should I be questioning, and can I do things differently today? And that sense of little by little, me being okay with the stuff that I'm doing, and me questioning myself and feeling that I'm taking one step at a time, we're all doing that. I mean, I'm hearing incredible ideas and incredible visions for the future of what this, whatever this is, becomes. So we will get through this. There is a path forward. We shouldn't despair. We should keep on going. But I think that starts with ourselves.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Folake, I ask you the same question. Where do you see us going from here? Would you like to come up? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Let's need to use this. Yes. So from here, I've learned it's been an experience. 4 days. 3 days here, and an additional one earlier. 3 days of interacting, 3 days of seeing the passion, the commitment from ladies and gentlemen that have been in the space of shaping the future generation, of sharing experiences, of showing commitment, and ready to collaborate and partner. So from here, I'm taking out 4 major things to shape the work that we do in Nigeria to ensure that no child is left behind, to ensure that all children are learning and they are doing that in safe places. So I'll see digital transformation from the rooms where we have EdTech and data and research studies from SDG to achieve SDG goals. I hear click learning from France, from South Africa. I hear scholars and researchers from France, from UK, talking about integrating technology into the classroom so that we can achieve better student engagement and learning outcomes. I see rooms, sessions, where we talk about inclusive education, ensuring that as we navigate the gendered world, as discussed from scholars from Lincoln, from Bristol, we can have equal learning opportunities for marginalized groups, for girls, for children with disabilities, so that we can have benefits to individuals and have social cohesion that can lead to economic growth in our countries. I see us talking about scaling teacher development, ensuring that we have continuous professional development for teachers, which is a critical element in upskilling educators. And I see presentations from India, from other countries, talking about this and how we can use technology to train teachers and take advantage of this. I see us talking about partnerships that will lead to provision of resources, better resources being provided, ensuring that we have infrastructure in the right places and the expertise to address the challenges we have in education. I hear equitable partnership being delivered by the talks we have from universities in Glasgow, we have British Council, we have talks from Toronto, from Bristol, from Oxford, talking about this. So how do we go ahead? How do we get there? These ideals we have presented in these rooms. We need to have strategic planning to build our capacity to ensure that we achieve this. Because if we don't change the way we work by being trained, then we might not be able to do this. We need to monitor and evaluate what we do and engage stakeholders. So for us in Nigeria, I see us embracing this change. We are already on the pathway of having education reforms. We have a Nigeria sector education reform initiatives where we are talking about TVET, we are talking about STEM, talking about issues of out-of-school children, and doing it in a very collaborative manner with dwindling resources. We have costs from USAID grants, but then we look inward to see what other collaboration, what other provision we have. And good enough, we have support from FCDO, we have from other partners from GPE. We are looking inwards to have domestic financing. So this platform has provided ways for us to look better at what we are doing in the country to ensure that all children are learning, all children are in safe places, no child is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Folake. Hussien, would you like to come up, or will you speak from your seat?
Thank you. Good afternoon. First and foremost, I think I should take this opportunity to be thankful for this opportunity, for these gatherings where we'll be able to share a lot of insights in the education sector. As the question was posed, I could just cluster my response into three main areas. Because what are the reflections that, of course, we've got from all these gatherings? I've been able to attend several conference rooms, and I have three main takeaways for the future directions. The first one is we need to move from projects to systems. This is very important. Because, for example, I can just give an example in my own country. We have 12 projects in the education sector. But what will happen after these projects? So we need to ensure that, of course, we have systems that after the end of this project, then how can we take over from there? So the first and the very important takeaway message is we need to go from pilots and innovations, then to go to the implementations through institutionalizations. But the second, of course, we need to move also from access to equity. We've been talking about universal, for example, I've attended a number of rooms. We talked about universal education to ensure access to education to all. But yes, if you look into many countries, yes, we have now increased the access to education. But what about the equity? So I think now the shift should be, as my takeaway, we should just now go not only to access, but access to equity and resilience. And to do this, we may have audits on access, but now to go to audits on equity now. These are the directions that, of course, we need to go. So given the reflections on a number of rooms that I've attended, these are the main reflections. But apart from that, also, I've managed to go through a number of rooms. We talk about the AI and technology. So I think it's a high time now to move from data to the action. We have so many data of issues. We know, of course, a lot of students, of course, a number of dropouts and so on and so forth. So it's high time now to move from the data now into action. So to me, these are the many reflections on the future directions. But you asked another question, how do we get there now? On how do we get there, there is a number of ways. But one of them is, you've mentioned a lot, through partnership and collaboration. If you look into many countries, including my own, we may have a number of interventions in terms of projects. But of course, if you look into these projects, of course, they're kind of fragmented. So if you have collaborations and partnerships, we can streamline and make a good use full of resources. So one of the issues I think for us to get there is through partnership and collaborations. For example, through public-private partnerships in terms of collaborations, many of innovations, we can scale them up through public-private partnerships. Also, could give another example. For example, we are talking of technology to ensure, of course, teachers and students access education. But if you can just partner with telecoms companies, maybe you can get at a low cost these digital interventions so they can help. So through partnership and collaborations, we can unlock a lot in terms of education. But apart from partnership and collaborations, but also sustainable financing. Because we may have all of these projects and then they end. What will be the way to sustain whatever has been accrued from these projects? So I think we need to localize to be able to mobilize our own resources in many countries to take over from whatever innovations this project has been brought into our areas. So one of the areas which is very important is we need to have sustainable financing. And this, of course, I've seen some examples in some rooms where I visited. For example, my sister from Nigeria, Hafsa, she shows, of course, how the Kaduna State, they've managed to take over from the projects that have been taking place and localize through their own resources. This is also one of the very important. But the other thing I think, of course, which is very important is strengthening teachers' professional development. Because teachers are at the heart of this, all of these changes. We need to ensure, of course, we capacitate our teachers so that, of course, they can be part of all of these changes. Because as we know that, of course, we are interested in learning outcomes. But, of course, the learning outcomes cannot be achieved without ensuring, of course, we have teachers which are well equipped. So it's our role to ensure, of course, to get there, then, of course, our teachers should be well equipped. I think I said I'll share 3 things. I think they are the main 3 things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, Judith, would you want to come up?
Thank you. This has been the most intellectually stimulating and confronting professional conference I've ever attended. Due to what's been said within these walls and what's going on globally, the two intertwined, we heard firsthand from Gaza, setting the framing in the most moving of ways. We heard about polycrises, conflict, displacement, climate shocks and inequality, and calls for a shift in policy principles to focus on justice, equality and inclusion rather than poverty, and for ideas, networks and solidarity strong enough to carry knowledge through the rubble, real and metaphorical. And questions: who is responsible, who bears the burden, and who should therefore bear the cost? That started us all thinking perhaps about a new paradigm, a different social contract for tackling poverty, inequality and injustice, shared accountability and partnership, funding that is innovative and impactful, and an end to dependency on aid and its distortionary effects. Political will and policies and action informed by evidence. In the UK, you all know, we're facing major shifts as a bilateral donor. The budget reductions across the sector are painful, sudden and deep, but forcing us, based on some of the questions I've just outlined, towards new, perhaps better ways of operating, and not just because we won't have as much money. By April 27, though, we will have cut our budgets to 0.3 owed to GNI in the UK, and education is no longer the priority it has been. And that's not because people don't understand the benefits of education, it's about tough choices. And that's not just happening in the UK, sadly. So our operating model will shift in 4 ways as part of the government's vision. But my sense is this is beginning to align with much of the discussions going on this week. We are moving from donor to investor to unlock growth, jobs and trade through more private sector funding. We're moving from service delivery to system support. Fewer bilateral projects, fewer people beating a path to the doors of ministries in countries overseas. From grants to expertise, leveraging UK strengths in our world-class universities, many of them represented here, I'm not being sycophantic, education and tech sectors. And from international intervention to local provision, something we've talked about long and hard, to deliver sustainable, locally led, locally informed solutions. The global challenges we're all facing demand a reset. Countries tell us they want partnership, not paternalism. And that's not just playing on alliteration. With less to spend, bilateral donors cannot be in every country and every sector and still make a difference at scale. Those days are over. And we know the multilateral system is under threat, and there is a common ambition to reform, to make it more streamlined and impactful, so that donors can deliver at scale with smaller contributions, lower transaction costs, less political and more coordinated. So what does this mean for education? Back in the UK momentarily, I want to acknowledge the impact of our cuts, hot on the heels of the USAID closure, with many partners in this room going through restructuring, staffing cuts, and even exiting education. Not what any of us would have wanted or imagined 12 months ago. But as bilateral donors, we are civil servants and we represent the government of the day. So we try to be thoughtful, professional, and well-informed while representing our governments, the UK for me. We will be retaining 5 priorities, and I hope these will resonate with what we've been discussing this week. Improving foundational learning outcomes for all children, girls, children with disabilities, refugees. Strengthening education systems in response to requests from partner governments. Increasing the scale and sources of financing. Safeguarding education in protracted crises and emergencies, keeping children safe from violence, and driving multilateral education architecture reform. We will also absolutely definitively retain our focus on data, evidence and research to inform decisions over scarce odour about all these priorities too, and to shortcut the route to have impact based on what we know about what works. Gone are the days of little pilots and scaling up and failure and closing and moving on and no legacy or sustainable impact left behind. And our partnerships with the academic community, with all of you, will remain a very high priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your really thoughtful answers to that first question. In the next section, I'm going to ask different questions to each of you. And I ask, again, as thoughtful and as grounded as you are in your own personal spaces to think about these questions, and then we will invite reflection from the wider community in the same areas. So I'll start with Judith this time, if that's okay, Judith. I know we feel beset by threats and dangers, and we've discussed them a lot the last 3 days. A time of monsters, I think you said, Yusuf. But I wanted to ask you about the next ones. What are the monsters, the dangers around the corner that we haven't seen yet?
Don't mention my steps. There we go, it's like Groundhog Day. There are indeed threats around the corner, monsters. It's actually quite a nice analogy, isn't it? Because we know they're not really monsters, which we can only see in part for now, but which we will see clearly, and which we can and find professional optimism to tackle. Firstly, the increasing severity and frequency of climate impacts on education. It has to be one of the top issues. It's going to go on for generations. For many learners and teachers, these impacts aren't round the corner, but felt right now in terms of heat, lack of water, lack of good nutrition, bad infrastructure, disruptions due to floods and cyclones. But many discussions this week have focused on coordinated action and solutions. We've come a long way in the last 3 years. Better anticipatory and pre-arranged financing, disaster risk financing, adaptation and resilience building, and education based on indigenous knowledge and local skills to protect ecosystems. Building resilient systems to conflict climate is an essential part of facing the world we are moving into. Secondly, a major focus on the fragility of education in emergencies and protracted crises. But again, we have come a long way on research, policy and programming for protecting and improving the education outcomes of children in these crises. Inclusion in national education systems is one solution, as we promoted at the Global Refugee Forum, but fraught with challenge, both political and practical. And we still need to identify the at-scale solutions to support displaced populations, education being a lifeline, not a luxury, if you remember. Thirdly, the time bomb of youth unemployment, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, where we know growth is going steeply upwards. Even for those students that have gained some learning at school, there are few jobs available after education. Already a problem and probably becoming acute over the next 3 decades. Perhaps a catalyst for change demanded by educated young adults, or a recipe for state failure. Education must lead to growth, jobs and stability, helping young people to become productive members of society, not disruptors due to despair and anger. Fourthly, multilateralism and collective action are under increasing strain, challenged by rising populism, geopolitical fragmentation, and shifting global priorities. This doesn't bode well in the run-up to 2030, and we don't know what lies ahead. Indeed, whether there will be appetite for future goals and collective action. But we will need a framework or some operating model going forward to replace the SDGs, realistic, affordable, and aligned with multiple partners' incentives. And fifthly, will AI prove to be a huge leap forward for all, or a new tool for inequality and manipulation of the global discourse on a vast scale, in part due to the weaknesses and biases of the large language models on which much of it is built? ChatGPT use has grown quickly over last year in low and middle income countries. Education is a major use case for ChatGPT, with 10.2% of user messages being requests for tutoring or teaching. 10.2%. And globally, nearly half of messages were from users under the age of 26. But there is a growing digital divide. So while AI is not the answer to everything, not utilising it risks that divide growing even further. We must therefore tread the pathway as to how it can support current systems rather than replace them, and also identify the sources of energy and water needed for the data centres. 1 bottle of water for each question you ask ChatGPT. Just saying. In conclusion, in the face of these confronting challenges, 3 thoughts. We need to constantly challenge our intrinsic motivation and how this may influence our policy making and partnerships. Think back to some of the more awkward conversations this week. Why do we do this? Laura said about investing a career, a lifetime of work in a sector, and then feeling that you've got it all wrong, you don't know how to position yourself. But we can rebuild that. Secondly, politics is a reality. Our job is to shape decisions with the best possible evidence, packaged in a way that is readily understandable. Expert evidence, though, based on what we know what works. Political leaders are under pressure and political cycles are short. We need to beware the pendulum, which should be calibrated by energy and motion and oscillation, but is often not when it comes to the politics, and we need to beware the iconoclasts. And thirdly, we need to support one another. Kindness, collaboration, and support all become scarce commodities when we're under pressure. We know that. We know it in the workplace, we know it out on the street, we know at home, we know when we're in a global context. But ultimately, we are a creative, problem-solving and resilient species. We must confront these challenges in partnership and solidarity, keeping our eye on the horizon. And I have to believe that we can work through this, not turn our back or give up on the coming generations and the world they will all have to navigate, which we're leaving for them. Thank you.
Perfect, yeah. Thank you, Judith. That was inspiring. Folake, maybe I'll come back to you second, if that's okay. Reflecting on your perspective as the federal government, can you examine your own role, and think about what has blocked change in the past and how we might overcome those blocks and find opportunities in the future? Wherever you are comfortable.
Thank you. So, from here, examine my own role and look at the challenges I have in the past and how to do it better in the future. So let me start with the challenges. Of course, we are all aware of limited resources, especially now that we have cuts in support for funding from the global funders, and we are going from grants to expertise, like my colleague just said. And of course, we have resistance to change. We are fixed in our ways of doing things, bureaucracy and the rest of it. But we have renewed determination to overcome. And from here, I'm seizing this moment from UKFIET to ensure that we embrace flexibility in our ways of working, rather than being rigid, to build capacity, and to also foster a culture of innovation. So many things have been said. We have learned new ways of doing things, research evidences of how better to achieve results, but we need to embrace them. And as we go back, we need to have better ways of working, collaborating, looking at what we have in our systems, ensuring that we put into practice policies. For instance, we have the National Policy on Non-State Actors. In our country, we just launched it in Nigeria. We need to find ways of working with the private sector. It's not just about, the government cannot do everything on its own. So we have to embrace change and make our decisions backed by data, not just by intuition. Make data-driven decisions to ensure we have innovative solutions to issues that confront us. We have the major issues of access and quality of education. So in finding solutions to these issues, we need to rely so much on innovation and innovative solutions. We have seen EdTech solutions to making our classrooms more interactive, achieving better learning outcomes. So we need to embrace this, to be open to receiving information and putting them to use. We have to leverage on global partnerships that's available for us. From this UKFIET, UKFIET's platform, we have seen a lot of innovations, a lot of global collaboration and solution. What works global education? We've seen community of practice for improving teachers' professional development. So we have to leverage on this to transform the education space so that we can ensure we have brighter future for our children and our nation. Thank you.
the emphasis on collaboration to find innovative solutions, and I think that's what a lot of us are relying on. Is that now on? No, still not on. Hussien, we'll come back to you again. Climate change is a key concern for Tanzania and for meeting your educational goals, as it is for many countries around the world. What can the education sector in Tanzania do to mitigate the impact of climate change?
Thank you. First of all, we need to, we all accept that, of course, climate change is not a myth, it's a reality. And it's a reality that, of course, we've been living with. So what do we do, and what, of course, should be done? First, of course, is curriculum reforms. To introduce climate change at all levels of our education, from primary schools, secondary schools, vocational schools, as well as tertiary schools. This is very important, because if you want to fight climate change, then of course this has to be done. And of course, in Tanzania, we've started. For example, we have a number of universities where, for example, I can just give one example, which is a very old universities in agriculture. They have now introduced courses on smart agriculture, so as to be adaptive to issues of climate change. But the second thing, of course, which is very important, is teachers training and professional development. I was able to attend one of the sessions in the mornings. Dr. Andrew Cunningham, you just give me one of the very good terms to teachers, called green jobs. Now teachers are called green jobs. So through that training, of course, if we'll be able to ensure, of course, we equip our teachers with knowledge and pedagogy that, of course, to teach on climate change and resilience effectively. We know that, of course, they are living in the environments where we have water scarcity because of climate change. They are living in areas where we have a problem for heat waves. So we believe that, of course, if you can equip our teachers well enough to be adaptive to climate change, that will be in a better position to adapt to climate change. And this has already been started in Tanzania. For example, Shule Bora, they've started, of course, doing a lot in that area. For example, in hot areas, of course, now they design classes in a manner that, of course, maybe you can have enough cross ventilations, you can insulate them from heat, but you also have intervention or water harvesting sort of interventions. All of this to be able to cope with this climate change impact. But the other things also, we as a country, we are in massive transformation in the education sector. We are now introducing TVET education in secondary schools. So what, of course, we emphasize on this area, also to develop skills in these TVET educations on green jobs. Because we believe that, of course, I can just give one example, which is, if you look into the budget of Tanzania in agriculture sector, especially in irrigation, because if you talk of irrigation, you talk of adaptive measure to climate change. The budget of irrigations for the last 4 years has been increased from 40 billion Tanzanian shillings to 400 billion Tanzanian shillings. It's more than 10,000% increase. But if we have this increase in massive irrigations, we need to have skills which, of course, will be able to service such of equipment that are used in irrigations sort of interventions. So one of the areas we need to ensure, of course, we strengthen our technical and vocational educations to be green. But also, we have problems of waste management, for example. We know that, of course, we have a lot of greenhouse gas emissions from waste management. So then how do we equip our TVET curriculums to cope with this massive increase of waste management? So, and along all the value chains of waste management, from recycling, from reducing waste, and so on and so forth. So we need to ensure, of course, our TVET curriculums, they equip enough our students to be able to cope with this problem of waste management, so as to reduce emission as a way of mitigation. But also, we know that, of course, we've been engaging as a country in a massive transformation in terms of tourism. But of course, given the climate change, we need to go to ecotourism. So this is an area also we need to emphasize when it comes to our TVET education. But also, for example, in terms of energy, as a country, we have energy master plan. The energy master plan talks about the energy mix. So if you're talking of energy mix, we need also to emphasize on renewable energy. So we need also to have skills with our students in TVET educations. How can they come up with innovations, but also be able to maintain and maintenance on these infrastructures. But the fourth point also is enhancing infrastructures in resource management in schools. For example, I know, of course, through Shulebora interventions, we've now building our schools in a manner that, of course, they can be adaptive to climate change. These are the things, of course, need to be well taken care of. But the last one, because I've seen also you've showed, you've given me the red card. We need to encourage and promote research and innovations. Of course, we've started also. We have our national Commission of Science and Technology. They are providing incentives, of course, for students to be able to come up with innovations on green space. So these are the things, of course, if we do them, of course, in the education sector, it can help, of course, to mitigate. Thank you, and very sorry for taking some of your minutes.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing in your learning from just this week. I think that's really exciting to point to actually what you heard and looked at this week that brought it together. And again, green jobs, climate adaptation as an opportunity for young people within your country. Last but not least, Laura, with a bird's eye view of philanthropy in our sector, can you help us see how the current architecture, aid architecture, philanthropy architecture, educational sector architecture, must and can move from a fractured moment to one where we're pulling together with a renewed sense of purpose?
There are several people. Does it work?
Well, I can hear you, but I think probably not.
Excellent. I think it does.
Yeah.
You can? Excellent. No, I think it works. Thank you. So there are several people in the room who I think can answer this question, and indeed in the last session that I was in downstairs did incredibly eloquently. Those who are members of the IEFG, the International Education Funders Group. We are a network of 100 foundations. I think very few people have a understanding of the diversity and reach of philanthropy, and I will admit readily, I didn't know a huge amount about philanthropy before I got this role 4 years ago. But what those from IEFG members said in the room downstairs was collaboration is, and has been for a while, not just pre-cut. It's been embedded in the notion of philanthropy now over the last few years. We really do see a growing impetus to work together, which is fantastic. So in some countries, like Sheila was pointing out in Peru, there is now a real incentive of foundations to work together as philanthropy, but also with government, with businesses, because that is another reality. Often people talk about the private sector and say philanthropy and business in one and make that kind of bucket. The reality is in a lot of middle-income countries, we are seeing businesses looking for profit in education, and I think that is a reality, but also looking for a lower profit margin than perhaps some of the global corporations, and looking for social impact at the same time, because their employees, their customer base are there. And so we're seeing some really interesting examples of that around the world. So there is an impetus for collaboration. We're certainly seeing that now in some aspects of the global philanthropic architecture. The American foundations, those who are still vocal, are very much driving the idea of pooling funds together. Though on the flip side of that, I've definitely heard voices from grantees of philanthropy to say, but hold on, be careful with that, because collaboration can be seen as cartels as well, right? Like we think that it is about kind of coordination, but it can also make it difficult for others to access that funding. So my bottom line is that across this wide group of organizations, and we are 100 foundations out of 10,000 plus that are out there funding education, right? Those members of IEFG are those who have got to the point of strategic investment in education, frustration maybe that their previous investments haven't produced the results they want to see. Some of them are big spenders every year, others are small, but they share and learn together. And there will be no one path. I think that is one thing I hear, the sort of desire to find a coordination structure or a collaboration approach that is going to take us forward and make things better. Within IEFG, we don't see that. We see many different clusters and many different pathways. But for me, it comes back to the idea that if we can all see ourselves, and I keep using this analogy of a puzzle, if we can all see ourselves as a piece of a puzzle, it doesn't mean that we have to be doing exactly the same thing, right? Like if there's a group of organizations who are really focused on foundational learning and particular approaches to foundational learning, others are working on social emotional learning, others are working on early childhood. If that's what's needed in the contexts, you also need some brilliant people working on secondary education and the challenges that come next. For me, that's collaboration. This idea that we have strategic awareness of what all the different funders are doing, and we're not rocking up in ministries of education and a long line of people knocking on the door saying, hey, I've got this idea and a new project, as you said. So I think we're on a path. I think some circumstances are moving in that direction, but I also think right now, and I know we're supposed to end on a positive note, but we're ending in Q&A, right? Collaboration is, at the moment, I would say, more of a conversation than a reality. There's a path to go.
Thank you. I think I hope you've had a sense of the depth of expertise, the mode of thinking that you have on the stage today. I think from these four people, you can ask questions that will help you to see how we can pull this together. I hope that over the last 3 days, you've had lots of people throw ideas at you that are brewing in your head, which will come together over time. So I'd like to open it up for questions. Yeah, excellent. There are people with microphones. Please do ask your questions, and I will try and pull them together. Yes, please.
Hello. Hi, I'm Nay. I'm from Myanmar, based at the University of Manchester, PhD student. A question that I have was about the move from grants to investment. What are the risks do you see in that move? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Abdeshafi Bobkir. I'm with Geneva Global. My question is for the two ministry people, please. With the new reality as it is right now, and the fact that you mentioned that we need to move from project to systems and from grant to expertise, my question is, to what extent the governments themselves are ready and they are changing their mind too, to receive this and then take this action on their end as well. The reason I'm asking this question is that there's an experience we're having with Ethiopia, and the government in Ethiopia is adopting a program that we are working with them, and I've never seen an adoption like that before. And it's a really good experience. So I'm just thinking, like, are the governments themselves ready for this task as well? Thank you.
One more, and then ask the panelists to answer if there are any others. Otherwise, there's one in the back. There was a hand up in the back. If you put your hand back up.
Yeah, thank you. My question is about how education can contribute better to growth and deal with it.
Oh, sorry, we can't hear you. Can you stand?
You want me to stand?
Yes, please.
Yeah, my question is in relation to how do we reorganize education so that it can contribute to growth and development and address the increasing challenge of despair among young people. I mean, how do you do this? Universities and education systems don't create jobs. So, and the promise of education in many countries has left a lot of young people really in despair. They have gone to university, they have done everything they were supposed to do, and in cities, you can see from one city to another in a number of countries. Just young people can't find the work. So what's wrong with education today, and how do we sort that out?
That's a tough one. Did someone want to take the first question, moving from grants to investments, and what are the risks there? Oh, is it?
Okay, really good question, because it's going to be a major shift. Just 10 years ago, we were providing from the UK what we called sector budget support, or even general budget support. General was a transfer of UK taxpayers' funds into the Ministry of Finance of a partner government. And we would have endless conversations about what they must use it for and how they must be accountable and what results they had to report and exactly how it could be dispersed and implemented and what we wanted to see on the ground. When we went to sector budget support, we were only saying, here's money, this is for education, but all of the rest was the same. This no longer should be the way that we're operating. We can't give enough money as individual bilateral donors in terms of grants. It requires too much of the partner governments who are left in a very uneven partnership. The power, the funding, the demands come from the people that distributed the funding. And I think that is a majorly faulty premise now in the way that we want to go forward. When countries do tell our ministers we want partnership, not paternalism, it goes back to a lot of the very difficult discussions we've been having over the last few days. Partner governments know how they want to reform their systems, and we do need to find the financing, but some of that needs to come from the private sector. It needs to come at large scale through the multilateral development banks. And there, I would say grant funding at large scale for the lowest income countries or the least developed countries, absolutely fine, because it can deliver change at scale, and that's a pooling of funding from multiple bilateral donors. But you've also got things like, and you know I'm going to say this, the International Finance Facility for Education, working through multilateral development banks with funding from Sweden, Canada and the UK, with a £7 return on each pound that goes in. Now that is an entirely different proposition, because you're getting a huge multiplier effect on, yes, UK and Canadian and Swedish taxpayer funding, but it's not just $1 in, and can we possibly squeeze $1 of impact out? So it's about the power dynamic, it's about the scale, and it's also about the risks of funding going astray. It doesn't quite deliver what it's supposed to deliver, and then how we in the UK and other governments maintain a level of taxpayer or British public, in our instance, support for what it is that we're trying to deliver overseas, where we can see the long-term benefits, but the public may not be able to.
Thanks, Judith. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on the investment question. Otherwise, Hussien, I was going to turn to you on the question about projects to systems, which you raised.
I think maybe I'll approach the project to systems and a bit of the last questions. How do we organize education to bring hope? I could just give some highlights on what is already happening in my country. So coming from project to system, first of all, I think you've had the presentations here. The donor appetite to keep on funding is keep on diminishing, which means there is no way. We have to adapt ourselves in a way that, of course, we should just come from projects and now to come to our systems. So the best way of doing it is also to institutionalize most of the things in our countries. For example, if you say, of course, we need to disburse financing to schools. So there must be a way to institutionalize to ensure, of course, this is not an optional. Then the fund should be given to a school because the policy stipulates that. And we've been doing it in some places. For example, we have the provisions of some of our budgets to primary schools from the central budget, and this is because of the laws of the country required to do that. So that's the best way to do it. We need to put it to institutionalize that approach. The second question on how do we organize educations to bring hope and despair? It's a very challenging question, and it's a very difficult one. But of course, we've seen from the experience what has happened in North Africa, in some of the East Africa, JNZ. These are the byproducts of neglecting the youth. So most of the countries now, they just come up with some innovations. How can we really address unemployment issue to youth? In my country, for example, we have several programs. So one of the programs is a reform in education sector. We now introduce TVET education to secondary schools to ensure, of course, these kids, they get skills from the secondary schools. But these skills, they are dependent on the context. If you are coming from agriculture areas, of course, the skill provided in school there is on agriculture issues. But if you come from an area, of course, is manufacturing, so it depends on the area. So this is the way how to cope with these skills issues, but also to cope with the demand. But also provision of startup capitals. Because we know that, of course, these are coming from schools, they don't have capital. So also there are programs to ensure, of course, we provide this sort of capital to ensure, of course, these kids, they can be able, of course, now to establish themselves. These are the things, of course, they may not be enough, but at least some countries are starting because there is no way we have to do it. The way we go it, if we have Gen Z issues, then we have to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. On the issue of systems, government's readiness, of course, before you can have any change, you need the support, you need to have the government on your side. If not, you'll just be running and you're working alone. And good enough for us in Nigeria, we have, for the current administration, we have the government that's really interested in having economy becoming a knowledge-based one and supporting education. And for us in the education sector, we have the current Nigeria Education Sector Renewal Initiative that has 6 main pillars of ensuring that we tackle the issues of access, quality, and then system support for education changes that will bring about the desired result. We have emphasis now on ensuring that we provide technical and vocational education and training. That, in a way, will solve the issue of unemployment, not just having a curriculum shift, but supporting, providing 21st century with technology and other resources that will really bring about proper training for the recipients of this form of education. We have emphasis now on science, technical education, engineering, mathematics, and medical sciences. That's another pillar of this necessary agenda. We have emphasis and attention on ensuring that we enroll the large number of adult school children, providing proper education for them, and even the Almajiri education system, ensuring that it's properly integrated into the formal school system. And government is not just saying this, but supporting with funding and corresponding resources. We have the issue of girl-child education, ensuring that not just only boys, but also girls, and we have proper gender-balanced education provision in the system. And data and digitalization is another major area of our government, ensuring that we go all the way so that all the edtech innovation we have is properly accepted and provided and supported. And we have education quality assurance, ensuring that whatever provision is quality assured to deliver on the education. Of course, I said earlier on, collaboration and partnerships. We are looking at innovative funding of education because we are very aware of the fact that external funds and grants are dwindling. So we are looking inwards to ensure that we unlock domestic financing and ensure that investment that we have in education, it depends on how you look at investment. It's a social investment. You do not have the result immediately, but for the future, it leads to economic development and you have the results coming back to you. So that way we are able to have our system working to ensure that the change we desire is properly supported by the government's commitment. Thank you.
Are kids in despair? I mean, yes, but also the most hope and optimism I hear is from young people, right? Like we ran a series last year on crises outside of education that are affecting education, and in every one had a young person, far younger than I, come along, and every single time they gave the most optimistic vision of the future. And so, in a way, I think we need to listen to young people more to retain that sense of hope. But at the same time, I have wondered for a long time, at what point is there going to be a tipping point away from education where parents start going, this isn't worth it, students, I mean, and it's not like students are sitting in school every day and believing it, and I get that. So in terms of what can we do about it, I think, I've spoken elsewhere and before about shifting the narrative on education to one that is more positive and can do, and isn't, it takes 20 years to get a learning outcome. You can see a learning change in 10 days in the classroom, teachers will say that. But it's the I think as those who are implementing or supporting the rollout of promising evidence-driven education programs, we've all been in situations, or at least I would warrant we've all been in situations, where something's not gone quite right, And like, in a way, it's that mindset and behavior shift stuff that I was talking about earlier, the sense that I've been involved in big education programs that were the spark of a great idea, but then so compromised by the time you got it to the end of design, let alone the start of implementation, because we tried to bring in 8 other partners, and you've got to go to the people above you who need to see this, that, and the other in it, and then there's all sorts of, and this is just on the, this is when I was back in Bangladesh working for a bilateral agency, but trying to shoehorn the various different multilateral actors into the table. The government has got every single director saying this is a priority. And so the programs become not what the evidence necessarily originally says. And then in implementation, there is a sort of path dependence, right? And we lose our sense of the ability to apply sort of judgment in a way. Now, I listen to Dan Honig's Navigation by Judgment a lot and feel like, well, the train has left the station. We've got to keep going with this implementation because we've got this partnership going. We've got this great set of things, moving, and there's big money involved in all of this. And then, surprise, surprise, the results don't turn out the way you want them to be. I mean, the number of research programs and research papers that I've listened to where I've heard, well, that teacher training program didn't work for all sorts of reasons, and then, oh, by the way, it was in term time. Well, what led that to be in term time? The teachers are in their classrooms. Like, how are we doing this, And so I do think, one, I push back on the despair a little bit, but two, I do think there are, are there ways we can free ourselves from that path dependence a little bit and use, I've been using the language of common sense. Andy has convinced me otherwise that I need to find a new phrasing for it. But because it's not easy to step back when the train has left the station. But if we're all in this moment of what do we do differently, then can we make the tweaks and adjustments that are needed in what are big bureaucracies and still big programs? Can we do that in a way that does get us to the promise of the delivery of at least some of the basics of education, even if we're not seeing the jobs, because that's a beyond education question. Can we do that better?
Yes, and I think we should ask the youth, what exactly do they want from education? What do they really want education to deliver to them? And then we can now sit down and do a review of our curriculum, the offerings, to see whether it will really match the desires of the youth. Because as we speak, we still have quite a number of jobs that are not yet taken up. And on the other hand, we have youth that are unemployed. They are unemployable, not that they don't have but they don't have the right skills. So we need to match the skills that they have with the jobs available. And then we need to ask this generation, what exactly do you want from education? And listen to them and adjust our curriculum to take care of their needs. I think we need to do that.
I think that's a good note to end on. Listen to the young people. Would be helpful. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Khadijah, and thanks again to our wonderful panel. I mean, what a fantastic note to end on. Let's ask our learners what they want. What do they want from education? So, if I haven't met you, my name's Frida Wolfenden. I'm the outgoing chair of the trustees of UKFIET. And just before we go to the sort of final words, the kind of joyous thank yous at the end of the conference and the safe travels and so on, I just wanted to take a few words to say something a little bit more serious. As some of you will be aware, an issue directly related to UKFIET conference sponsorship was raised yesterday at the base plenary. I want to emphasise again that we are listening hard, and as a learning organisation, we're committed to continuously improving our practice. We are on a journey. We will not be making any decisions. I won't be making any announcements today. To do so without due deliberation would not be appropriate. It risks being glib or performative. These are serious issues which demand dedicated time and space for deep reflection by all of us as a community, by the trustees, the executive, and our member organisations. We will be inviting member representatives to participate in a review of appropriate, relevant policy as part of our discussions on how we move to practice UKFIET values. So if you're part of an organisation or an institution that's not currently a member of UKFIET, we urge you to apply to join. All the details are on the website. If you would like to share thoughts now or in the next few days, please email the address shared this morning in the app or again on the website. And finally, if you'd like to raise issues directly with me or my fellow members of the board, trustees will be happy to listen at the end of the conference in just a very few minutes. Can be found at the back of the hall, and we would be very happy to listen to you directly. Thank you. And meantime, I'm handing over to Emma.
I don't have very many words other than just thank you very much. It's been such a great 3 days. If I'm being honest, it's been a great year. It's taken a long time to kind of get to this point, and that is not without an awful lot of people investing an awful lot of time, and it's just not possible without all of you coming and submitting papers. We had so many. It was a record year, so thank you so much. And I'm glad you're all here, and the discussions that we've been having have been absolutely fantastic. But it's also all the people behind. So yes, there's the UKFIET Executive Committee and the trustees. I'm not sure if Sarah is in the room, and Sandra. I have never worked with anybody so efficient, so organised, and she just keeps everything on track. It is simply amazing. I want to thank Fran, my co-chair, who has kept me on the straight and narrow. And all the co-conveners. We had 15 this year, and they were just brilliant. Everybody worked really hard. Everybody got through all the submissions and made really thoughtful decisions. So thank you very much for all of your help. And then lastly, there's a whole bevy of volunteers. Most of us are volunteers. So thank you to everybody who helped out in whichever way, shape or form, whether it was being a bouncer on a door because the sessions were so exciting, everybody wanted to go, or whether it was helping people and directing them around the place and actually reflecting on what those sessions were telling us. So thank you so much to all those volunteers. I love volunteerism. All right, thank you very much.
So, Emma,
Where to start? As one of our esteemed panelists has just commented, this has been a highly intellectual conference, but with tremendous relevance. And the two don't always go together. So you and your team assembled a wonderful group of speakers, such a diverse, wide-ranging array of papers, creative sessions. Fantastic to have that innovation and quick fires. As I mentioned at the AGM, the conference has been attended by over 750 people from 66 countries. So I think we're really taking a significant step towards becoming a forum that truly represents different voices, different perspectives, different knowledges. Well done. And huge thanks. So I just want to finish with also saying thank you to Maya, please. Who has very adroitly and ably steered the UKFIET Executive Committee over the last year after many years of membership of the committee. So I've sort of stood in admiration at your efficiency and effectiveness. I think I need to learn from you about how to chair meetings a little bit more timely. So thank you so much, Maya. Thank you.
And it's not quite the end, because we also have the trustees coming to the end of their terms, at least Frida, who's the current chair of trustees, and Leon, who's the deputy chair. I think Leon had to leave early, unless I'm wrong. But anyway, thank you so much to you, Frida, for your relentless efforts in chairing the trustees. And it's clearly a voluntary role. It takes sometimes an awful lot more effort and time than people imagine. So thank you, Frida, for all your efforts, and to Leon as well.